9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is the DSR Podcast. Hello and welcome to Need to Know in a special joined episode with our Words Matter podcast. Norm Ornstein is away this week, but we're going to talk about politics anyway with two of the smartest people we know and our good friends, Tara McGowan of Courier Empire. How are you doing, Tara?
I am doing well, David. Happy to be here.
Very glad to have you here. And Simon Rosenberg of the Hopium Empire. How are you doing, Simon?
Very, very small empire. I'm good, David. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you know, I just thought we have to get back in the groove. It's back to school time. It's September. And also, I just can't help but get over the fact that there is a midterm election in about a year. Like, we're back in it already, you know? I mean, it seemed to me that we all were talking about campaigns not too long ago, and now here we're in the midst of one. And I don't think American politics has ever really been in the place that it is right now as we look forward to that year because of the nature of our administration, its attitudes towards elections, the nature of the Democratic Party, the nature of the challenges that we all face, some of the generational changes that are burbling under the surface there. And so you guys are the smartest people I know, so I thought I would turn to you. Tara, have I got it wrong? Is this just going to be another midterm election doing what midterm elections do?
No, I don't think you've gotten it wrong, but also there are a lot of elections happening this year already. So there's some things to look to and point to. The year after presidential elections is always when New Jersey and Virginia have their statewide elections, and those tend to be, the focus of the media and hopefully the parties and the consultants looking at them as kind of the ability to sort of litmus test and innovate and try out messaging and see where the electorate is, kind of using these states and these constituencies to see where folks are and how they're feeling about the parties and the issues and the president. And so, and then of course there's the New York City mayoral race, which has made a lot of news. So that's where my focus has been on elections, is what can we learn and what can we see that's happening right now as we're just weeks out from some of these. And I'm sure Simon has a lot of thoughts, but I'm a little bit worried actually at what I'm seeing in Virginia and New Jersey. And not that I think that the Democratic candidates running for governor will fall short. I hope that they don't, but I have not been seeing as much of an adoption, or rather, I should say, I have not seen the Democratic campaigns in those states really absorb the lessons that I think that we've all been talking about from 2024 as much as I would like to. But I'm really curious for Simon's take on that. And I think that's critical for the midterms. I think that we need to learn what we can now to be prepared.
Before we get to Simon's take, though, I have to say that it does seem to me that Zoran Mamdani in New York has learned the lessons and is, in fact, quite apart from, the specifics of his platform, he's the Tara McGowan candidate. He is always on. He's always on social media. He's very good on it. He's super authentic. He's got it down to... he just sort of gets the nature of political dialogue today in a way that most other candidates don't seem to. I mean, am I right there?
No, you're absolutely right. And I don't necessarily agree with all of his policy prescriptions or solutions, but from a candidate and tactical standpoint in the way that his campaign is run, yes, it's a 10 out of 10. He is authentically himself. He is bringing joy. Most importantly, he is bringing vision. He's bringing a positive vision and plans for how folks can achieve it. And it demonstrates that you don't have to just run against Trump and Republicans to be able to build a movement and build support and energy and enthusiasm. And, it also shows how desperately folks want to have hope. Right now, there isn't a lot of hope to be found as we talk about national politics in this administration. And so I am really energized by his campaign. And yet, I will say that it has been really disheartening that Democratic leaders in Congress, most notably Hakeem and Chuck Schumer, neither of them have come out and endorsed him as the Democratic candidate running in the mayoral race. And I think that speaks to the larger fissures in the Democratic Party and progressive movement right now. And those are, in my opinion, some of the biggest threats we face in order to be able to have a chance at taking back power at every level.
Fissures and failures, and I think when you said Democratic leaders, I saw air quotes because they're certainly they're certainly.
I mean, did you see me swallow?
I'm gonna get you guys are gonna get me in trouble in this discussion. But.
Well, look. I mean, I'm willing to stand up here and say I'm the wild lefty in this crowd, so I'm perfectly happy to be the one saying those things. Simon,
well,
you can be reasonable.
You are closest to where the majority of our voters are then, David. So it would behoove our quote-unquote leaders to listen.
Yeah, I agree. But you did mention hope there, Tara. And you know who invented hope?
Barack Obama. Bill Clinton, the man from Hope, right? I worked for him.
Bill Clinton was born in Hope.
Born in Hope, Arkansas, right? I mean, come on. How is that? I mean, thinking back on that, how is that even possible, right? But it's really true. So you want me to weigh in here?
Of course.
Thanks for the sort of the setup here, everybody. I want to talk about what I've been writing over the last couple of days, which is sort of my sense of coming back to town, this newly occupied D.C. that I live in and have lived in for decades. I think something has changed in the political dynamic in the country, and that is that I think that the failures of Trumpism, the clear material harm that he's brought to the country, are becoming harder and harder to ignore or wish away. And that it's creating more ambition in opposition to him. And you've seen it through a series of things. Greater ambition in the courts. Their rulings are more aggressive and they're moving with greater speed. And there's been pushback from unnamed judges against the way the Supreme Court is conducting itself. You've seen states now are organizing themselves to fight the vaccine insanity of Robert Kennedy. You saw the Democratic governors do a joint letter about not occupying their states. It was the first time the governors had ever done anything like this. I think you saw Ray Dalio, right, an important investor, just, crushing Trump in the front page of the Financial Times on Monday, and what was a really wild interview about our decline into authoritarianism and the wreckage that he's bringing to the economy. I think that the sort of manifest failures of Trump, which are impossible now to ignore, the reckoning around that, his unpopularity, his clear physical and cognitive decline, which is impossible to ignore now, is creating more ambition and boldness in opposition. And you saw it yesterday manifest in the Kennedy hearing, right? Not only were Democrats far more aggressive and effective in questioning him than I think we've seen in virtually any committee hearing, but the Republicans joined in. And some of the most brutal moments in that hearing came from Republican questioning. It wasn't just the Democrats. And that was a sign to me of this sort of growing sense that, like, this shit ain't going right, and we gotta start digging out from the rubble here and fix it. And I think that people, and my hope is that we can go win the fall, win these elections, right, and start to send a clear signal that the tide is turning against this politics. I think we have an opportunity to do that this fall. I'm not saying we will. I think candidates have to execute. Our leaders have to lead and have more. I hope that if I'm right about all this, to me, the most significant thing is I hope that our House and Senate leaders join this movement towards greater ambition and boldness in challenging Trump that we saw yesterday in the Senate hearing. So I'm optimistic that something is changing and that sort of the general kind of awfulness of Trumpism is just settling in, and people are pissed. And what we saw in last thing is that I cite in my post today a new analysis by G. Elliott Morris. The intensity, we've never seen. Trump now is breaking records in one regard in polling, is that the level of extreme intensity of opposition to him versus the intensity of his support, the extreme support, is bigger than we've ever seen recorded before, meaning that he's got 46% of the country is extremely opposed to his agenda, which is incredible levels of intensity, the kinds of things we're seeing in the special elections and so on. But it also means that what's happening is that he's losing the country and that he's not going to be able to get majority support any longer for any of his initiatives. And so he's in a very diminished place as a political figure. And I strongly recommend this piece by G. Elliott Morris in his great Substack called Strength in Numbers, who went through history and showed that Trump is in a very dangerous and unprecedented place in terms of the intensity of opposition that he faces right now.
Yeah, but I think we're getting at some. Well, actually, we're not getting at it. We're tiptoeing around it. So let's get at it, okay? Because here, Tara was talking about the Virginia campaign and the New Jersey campaign, which are both, because of the nature of the states, more centrist campaigns. And we're talking about the leadership of the Democratic Party. And we're talking about what resonates and what doesn't resonate. And there's a tension there. Because where Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and some of the Bland Center are, and a lot of the consultants are, doesn't seem to be resonating in certain places. And it is not responsive to, Hakeem, I'm sorry, you guys can say what you want about Hakeem Jeffries. But, Hakeem Jeffries, the other day is, well, let's work together on housing. And it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, man. Like, wake up. What year is this? Do you have any idea where you are? And, not backing Mamdani. Some people get it. It's not like Jerry Nadler, a congressman from Manhattan, is a spring chicken, right? He's stepping out of this thing, but he's saying, yeah, we need generational change. We need something new. He embraced Mamdani, and I'm not saying that's the only litmus test, but, the question is, when you see who resonates, it's not all the way by the left. J.B. Pritzker is resonating. There are other people out there who are resonating because they're willing to speak the words like the words Simon just spoke. But the, quote, leaders aren't, Tara. How do we resolve that? How does that get resolved?
I think about this obsessively, as I know you do too, David, and I've given up on them. They're not willing to evolve or change. They have, the allies and the resources that have gotten them into these positions of power and kept them in these positions of power. That's their protecting their livelihood. I don't believe that it's ideological. I think it's self-preservation. And I think that's the fight that we're having out in the Democratic Party, right? Is that you should not be operating from a position of self-preservation of your power and position over what needs to be done to protect the American people and to fight back against these unprecedented moves by, frankly, an authoritarian regime that's taken over the entire executive branch. And so I think, again, it doesn't come down to left or right or centrist versus leftist. It's like, who's willing to take the fight, to really, really, really take the fight, not send strongly worded letters, more air quotes, to Republicans, and who's actually willing to pursue a bold vision. And I think, one name I'm surprised hasn't come up yet is Gavin Newsom. No Democrats would call him a lefty, but my God, is he fighting? And is he setting a precedent and a permission structure for other Democrats like Wes Moore and Kathy Hochul and others to come out and say, okay, we're going to play ball too. Like, the gerrymandering fight is a very big deal that we cannot have be lost from the conversation, because that is a fight worth having. That is a fight we need to have. And if we want a chance at winning back the House next year, because Trump knows how unpopular he is, right? All of the data that Simon cited, Trump and his team are well aware of this. I do not believe that they care, because I do not believe that they think they ever need to win a free and fair election again. I think that they are already pursuing Orban's playbook, right? How do we create more seats where we can? How do we take away mail-in voting? How do we suppress more voters, take them off the rolls, right? How do we keep elections and democracy around, but only on our terms? And so the illusion of democracy continues to exist, and yet there is not real democracy in place. And that's what I'm really worried about. And I'm very worried that we might not be prepared for some of those things playing out in Virginia. You know, we are lucky that we have a governor in place in New Jersey. Should there be foul play? We don't have that in Virginia. We have Youngkin, right? And his administration in Virginia in control of the elections. And so these are the things that are on my mind, is that I do not believe that they have any intention of playing to win a free and fair election this year or next in the midterms. And where are the Democrats talking about that every single day outside of Gavin Newsom?
Yeah. And David, if I could jump in, is that Tara, on your long list of ways of creating the illusion of democracy, you left out one thing that I know you're obsessed with too, which is just them taking greater control of legacy media, right? Which has been a central. I know it's a central crusade of your life, right? And I just wanted to make sure we didn't overlook that.
This is not a reference to Barry Weiss replacing Walter Cronkite at CBS News.
No, I know. I mean, listen, all of us now on Substack think that we can go cash out for 25 million bucks, right? I mean, that's the goal. But anyway, the second piece about Gavin is that, you know, I had a meeting yesterday on the House side with a member and his staff just to talk about the fall. And, you know, and one of the things I talked about was how much Gavin has, my dear friend Gavin, who has put an enormous amount of pressure on the Washington political establishment to match him in his ambition and in the intensity in which he's bringing this fight. That's part of what I was trying to describe, is about what I think has changed since we were here in late July, early August, is that there's now an example with Gavin, with the Texas Democrats, with J.B. Pritzker, right, with Wes Moore, to your point. I think Chris Murphy's doing a pretty remarkable job as well, traveling around the country and making strong arguments, is that there is now examples of how we can find a higher gear and be more bold and ambitious. And I think that I haven't given up, because, you know, we have to fight the war with the army that we have and not the one that we wish we had. And I think part of our job, people watching and listening to this, is I talk at Hopium about how our job in our community is to help our elected leaders understand what's required of them now. And because what's required of them now is different than what was required of them a year ago or 2 years ago. And our job has to be to continue to advocate to them through calls and contacts and all the way that we reach these offices, that we're expecting this kind of bold ambition in opposition to Trump. It's necessary. It's patriotic. It's an exhibition of love of country, right? By doing this, and we have to not make it easy for our leaders not to follow this path. We have to do everything we can to be in their face and encouraging them to move forward, because in the movement like ours, everyone has to play at the highest level of the game of what they're capable of, right? That in whatever narrow lane that we're all in, or whatever our role is, we need everyone operating at the highest level for us to be successful. And so I think we continue to have very high expectations of our leaders, and to be as aggressive about contacting them as we are about Republicans in our engagement. But you know, I hope that what the lesson of this conversation and what we've seen in the last few days will help bolster Schumer and Jeffries to be more ambitious in this fall battle over the budget that's coming and the government shutdown, and to not accept the easy path, but to do what's necessary now in a time of enormous challenge for the country.
Mm-hmm. Simon, do you have...
No, wait. Do you want to bet money? Do you want to bet money on how that's going to turn out?
I am not forestalling options.
Some of the 25 million you're going to get.
We're all going to get 25 million, right? That's the whole point. Like the Barry Weiss example now, Tara's going to get 25 million. You're going to get 25 million. That's now the new, we all.
Remind you, you have to be in bed with tech oligarchs to be of that level of value right now.
Right. Well, we have to be hewing the line of the anti-woke, right? The new anti-woke philosophy of Silicon Valley.
By the way, there is a serious issue in the middle of that I was discussing with a very prominent Democrat that I just want to throw into the middle of all of this frivolity. Because frankly, I find the whole thing depressing about Barry White also. But, and that is, you talk about tech oligarchs, Tara. We don't have tech oligarchs. We don't have a place in Silicon Valley. There are there are a few, but there are big buckets of money out there. We don't have a place. They're just like, look at them last night with, Trump at this dinner and Melania. And this is money. This is the future. This is a lot of power. And Dems are like saying, oh, no, we're going to be part of that conversation. Seems to me to be a big mistake. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think Hakeem Jeffries just did a big Silicon Valley fundraiser with the tech folks. And I think what's happening is that like a lot of Democrats are actually protecting those relationships and not pursuing regulation on AI, and yet not actually investing, like finding the ones who will invest in our values and in our politics. So it's the worst on both sides of the issue. If you want to take a strong stand against AI in a smart solutions-oriented way, that would be welcome. I think it's necessary. I think the American people are scared about it. It is going to destroy jobs. It is already being, used to test things on children, and it is a space that requires a lot of attention and thoughtfulness, and you can't stop it. So how do we make sure that it is regulated over time? And yet Democrats just continue to prove to be impotent on anything that requires looking around corners and trying to be proactive or offensive. And so they have ceded AI and all of the leaders that are, going to be taking over the world and already are to the right. And the White House has welcomed them with open arms and are benefiting financially, personally, and politically heavily from that decision.
Because these guys, AI aside, we can talk about AI at some point, they control the U.S. information infrastructure.
Correct.
They know where the U.S. information infrastructure is going.
Correct.
They've agreed that they'll say, well, I'm going to buy the Washington Post, and I'm going to buy the LA Times, and I'm going to buy CBS News, and I'm going to go and I'm going to get control of ABC and CNN, and or Elon doing his thing, and we're not in the game, and we're not in the game, Simon.
And so, two things. One is that, as somebody who was out in the Valley 30 years ago and helped forge the relationship between the Democratic Party and the Valley in those days, it is amazing to see how far right all of this has moved, and this is a whole other show, David, that we could do and talk about this, because I actually have been asked to do a major interview with a publication about this, and I don't have my thoughts all totally together about what's happened, because I also think what's happened has been rapid just in the last few years. I mean, there was sort of this all kind of moved very quickly, but it's becoming institutionalized now, right? I mean, where the Valley, the leadership of the Valley has become avowedly sort of center-right or even far-right. And, the Valley was Democratic and pro-Democrat for a long time. And this is a very significant shift. And I do think that Trump, one of the things that animates Donald Trump is, and it's even in the cutting of PBS and it's the cutting of money to educational institutions. They want to dry up all of our money and they want to take all the money for themselves for politics. Not necessarily just for their own pockets and their plunder, but there is, I think, a strategy to try to dry up our sources of income and money for our politics and expand theirs. That includes things like defunding PBS, where we're now racing to save, NPR and PBS stations, right, and using our limited resources to do that. We're, putting money back into the endowments of universities that are being attacked. I think this is a broad part of this broad strategy, urbanization, whatever you want to call it. But the second thing I just want to say, and we talked about this a few weeks ago when I was on, despite all of that, Donald Trump is remarkably unpopular, given their information superiority, which is significant. He's remarkably unpopular. He can't get majority support on any major issue that he's pursued, whether it was the bombing of Iran, the occupation of D.C., his big ugly bill, which they're now desperately rebranding and trying to fix, or even immigration. He's the country is moving away from him in very profound ways, despite all of this, and it's what has to give us hope and encouragement that, despite it all, right, the uncommon wisdom of the common people is evident right now in their rejection of this awful politics, and profound rejection, right? I mean, as I said, with greater intensity than we've ever seen in the history of polling at this point in any presidency. And so, look, this is why we're here. We're in the middle of this battle. We understand the terms of, there's no illusion, right, about where we are. And the good news is that we're overperforming in elections and winning elections. We just won an incredibly important flipped a seat in Iowa. We should win Virginia and New Jersey. I just interviewed Mikey Sherrill yesterday. And what was interesting about the interview with her, who's running for governor in New Jersey, is that she felt like she had enormous running room on the ground in terms of the issues that voters care about. And that, her opponent is for increasing utility costs and energy costs. Her opponent is for the tariffs, increasing prices on everyday people. Her opponent is for the ACA cuts and the Medicaid cuts. And what she was reflecting, and I haven't released the interview yet, is that she felt that she was deeply in touch, and her message was where voters were from having spent a year on the ground, and that he was nowhere to be found, that the positions he was advocating were way out of sync with where voters were. That's not where we were a year ago, right? A year ago, we were in the inverse position where we were struggling to connect, with people's day-to-day stuff. So she reported that she felt really good about the way the landscape was working out, and that they basically can't run on and win on the current Trump agenda, which is why they're furiously both trying to shape the elections. I like the way Tara talked about that. But also they're rebranding, right? The immigration enforcement now became crime fighting. They are, yesterday, I think they pulled they basically let Robert Kennedy go down into the dunk tank. And I think he's in deep shit, with them because this stuff isn't working. They've rebranded the bill. So I think there's evidence that they're aware that they're deeply out of position with voters, and they're going to be doing everything they possibly can in the next 12 months or 14 months to get back into a better position. But it's why I'm optimistic about what's going to happen this November. I don't think they can fix this stuff between now and November. And we should have the elections that we all want to have if we keep working really hard.
Well, that's encouraging, because Tara started us off and saying, this is kind of a downer, really.
Well, but can I just comment on that? She's not wrong about anything she said about that, right? The issue of the transition of the Democratic Party to this kind of, this new tactical party that Mom Donnie, right, has given us, is not rippled through the ecosystem, right? That stuff is still kind of new. We do have a lot of work to do to keep reinventing on the tactical side, for 2026. And Tara's exactly right about that hasn't necessarily manifested in these races. It doesn't mean that we're not going to win them, though, and that's what's important. But she's right about the need and necessity for us to continue to innovate and evolve as a family.
Right. Thanks, Simon. And I will also remind us that every time Trump is in power, his popularity plummets. We had no problem winning elections the last time he was president. That was despite Democrats, I think, in a lot of ways. And that's my fear, is that we continue to just rely on the headwinds against Trump and not actually present a case to the American people, because what we're not talking about is how deeply, deeply, historically unpopular Democrats and the Democratic brand still are to voters. So yes, I do believe we'll eke out these wins. They may even be tremendous wins. We're going to see other wins in places like Iowa and other places, because the headwinds against Trump and this administration are fierce. That's why they will, I think, do everything they can to make sure that they can win elections that they couldn't win based on popularity or their merits. That's my fear, though, is that Democrats continue to refuse to learn lessons about where the American people are. And that's where my cynicism stems from. And I don't have a good solution for it until these leaders step aside. I just really don't, because they know this too. They know that they can build on these headwinds and take credit for these wins without changing any of their ways.
So, Simon, why are Democrats so unpopular? We're very likable people here. I mean, and I know other Democrats, they're pretty likable. Actually, come to think of it, some of them really annoy me. So maybe that's the thing. But why? What? I mean, does it even matter? I mean, people don't vote for a brand, they vote for candidates.
Thank you for saying that, because what matters is what happens when people vote, not polling, right? And so the good news is that despite sort of, what we know from the polling, right, is that the reason why Democrats are polling lower in their approval rating and their favorability is because there are many Democrats who are disappointed with their leaders, right? And the Republicans still hate us, and that will always be the case. But the reason the numbers are down is because Democrats, I think some of this has to do with losing a presidential election to this guy, right? And also just the mess of what happened with Biden. And I think some of this is still the Biden hangover, and also losing an election. I mean, really disappointing losing election to this guy and watching what's happening to the country. And it's why I think that, as Tara said, and we'll reiterate that, we started finding a higher gear in August. Gavin Newsom and the Texas Democrats and J.B. Pritzker, and now people, as Tara said, are emulating this. And I think we're in the process of finding our voice. I think it's been slow, and we've been late to the game here. There's no question about that. But I think what we have to do is to continue to encourage and reward our leaders for bold ambition in a time of national crisis, and that we should not allow them to get away with taking the easy path here. There is no easy path here, David. You're an historian. You understand this. I use a line that at the end of every post now, which is that the best way out is through, right? Meaning that the only way we're going to get to the other side of Trump is we have to go right into it. And there isn't going to be an easy way to do this. There isn't going to be, last time we took the easy path, right? He wasn't prosecuted over his crimes in 2020 from the attack on the Capitol. We have to, the stuff that we're going to have to do over the next 10 years in order to restore the integrity of our democracy and our country and the greatness of America is going to be some of the hardest political work that any Americans have ever done in all of our history. Because it's going to require many of their leaders to go to jail if we are going, and to stay in jail in order for justice to be served. And this is something we failed to do last time.
No shit.
We have to learn from that. Merrick Garland is a dark figure in this period, right? In enabling the authoritarianism.
So's Joe Biden. But go on.
But I think so. What I'm saying is that we have to start learning how to do the hard things and not believe that this is going to be easy at any point. And I agree with the general sentiment that part of what has worried me about Democrats in Washington is that there's this sort of sense that, well, they're going to screw up, we're going to win the midterms, we'll get back power, and then we'll get around to starting to fix things. And meanwhile, Trump is continuing to destroy the country, and we have to both be focused on winning back power and mitigating the damage that he's doing. And I think we've been really poor at the damage mitigation and confronting and challenging him and being in his face 24/7, 365. I'll give you an example. The leadership can't go on recess ever again, right? He's operating 24/7, 365. And our leadership offices took a month off in August and weren't messaging and fighting him every day. Come on, guys. We're so past that at this point that's even something that was allowed to happen. Bring in Amy Klobuchar for 3 days and then bring in Chris Murphy for 3 days. Right? Rotate the leadership so there's a voice in the news stories every day, punching him and hitting him every day, right? We have to learn how to get to a higher gear in this fight. And I am optimistic now that things are changing in ways that it is more likely that we're going to make significant strides in that regard than I felt 2 months ago. But a lot of it has to do with us continuing to be intolerant of lack of ambition from our leaders in a time of national crisis. And so that's what I do at Hopium every day, right? I'm trying to continue to take the next hill, right? To keep fighting and taking the wins and building on them. And I think that I'm more encouraged today that we have the opportunity this fall to make the central message of this period that the tide is turning against Trump and MAGA, and that the country's starting to restore and right itself after this terrible period of shock and awe. But that is up to us in order to execute against that in the coming months.
But Tara, if the information ecosystem has changed, and people, a news cycle is now 90 minutes long, and there are 18 of them every day, and you have to be engaged in the way that Simon is just talking about it all the time. And you have to be responding to every thing in it. And we don't do that. And still half of the folks that we've got out there suffer from Democratic candidate disease, which is, I'll explain the symptom. The principal symptom of Democratic candidate disease is they always look like they're trying to figure out what the right answer is, as opposed to actually just saying what they think, right? And, we're in a moment, as you guys describe extremely well, where authenticity, it's just obvious. You can tell. You can't fake it. Either you're speaking what's in your heart or you're not. And you're speaking to what the need of the moment is or you're not. And you got to be using these new tools to get there. This requires a big shift in the thinking, which I see some people doing, but I don't see a lot of people doing. Simon is a little hopeful here for a change. And I'm just wondering, are you optimistic that we can actually get the memo here? Actually, I know people don't get memos anymore. But are you optimistic that people understand what's going on and can rise to the challenge?
This is really hard for me because I literally have Obama's handwriting of "Yes, we can" tattooed on my arm. I am somebody who holds a lot of hope and optimism. This is the most cynical I have ever been about our politics and about our country and about the Democratic Party. Because I don't believe that the folks that are in power right now in the party and their operatives and their consultants that they continue to empower and embolden and pay, I don't think that they are serious about this fight at all. I really don't. I hate to generalize, but that is what I have learned from the 10 years pushing the boulder up the mountain, trying to get them to understand that the media ecosystem has changed, trying to invest in it in smart and savvy ways, trying to get ahead of the curve instead of always behind. And I'm not in any position to ever give up. I'll never give up on this country or this fight, but I have given up on the establishment Democratic Party. And I do think that the people who get it are the American people. And I do think that they are the ones who are going to the voters are going to be the ones who decide. I am most excited about the primary contests next year because I think they are going to be fierce in the Democratic Party, and I think that they should be because I think that we have to hold our leaders accountable, and I think we have to vote them out if they are not bringing the fight that is required of this moment, and they are not being the bold leaders that Simon is talking about. I think that we're going to watch this play out again in the CR vote. If Hakeem and Schumer talk about bipartisanship and they do not shut this government down rather than cut deals that will not be honored, because that has been what has happened through the rescissions that they have used for the past budget fight, then what are we doing here? I really don't know. And so I think that there have to be leadership changes, and I think that those have to be forced by immense pressure from the outside. And I think that we also have to build a movement of civil disobedience against this administration. And honestly, the most energy that we saw after Trump was inaugurated was around Elon Musk. frankly. And then we got him out, and now we're not seeing that at the same level. I mean, we've seen good protests in D.C. and Chicago because they're literally being militarized by this administration, which is part of the authoritarian playbook that he's going to be pursuing everywhere. But we have to get people away from their screens and into the streets in key moments, and that's where the leadership is required, and that's where it's lacking right now. So I wish that I could be more hopeful. I hate being this doom and gloom, but I am I'm deeply, deeply worried about the next few years in this country.
Can I show you something? Let me get this, if you can see it. Hold on.
Just so long as it's not something you have tattooed on your body.
No, this is the Economist cover this week.
America's missing opposition with a
And look at the face on the donkey, like kind of just out wandering around.
He's just grazing.
Yeah.
Chomping on some grass.
So, David, that was the manifestation of everything. That's the cover of The Economist this week. Yeah, look, I'm not giving up either, and I'm just, I am an establishment Democrat. I've been here a long time. It would be absurd for me to be anything other than that, right? And I'm continuing to try to lead from inside, and that's my job. We all have different jobs in this movement, and that's my particular job. And I do feel the ground is shifting, and the question is, will the leaders feel that shift and understand it in time to make this budget battle something where we come out with wins, and that it doesn't feel like an unbelievable loss? Because Trump is stumbling. It would be just politically, and I know we got to go, David, politically, I'll wrap up. He is stumbling. The jobs report today was terrible for him. It's clear his economic agenda has failed. The hand-holding of Modi and Xi and Putin was an example of what may be the biggest foreign policy blunder in American history by Trump's tariffs, which have now dramatically accelerated the development of a post-American world and dramatically weakened our global standing. There is a reckoning coming, I think, of the idiocy and the extremism and the betrayal and the sabotage. And we saw it again yesterday. Again, I want to come back to this hearing, which I think was an extraordinary moment in the early Trump era, where you saw Republicans just pummeling Kennedy, pummeling him, right, with abandon. And so I think that's symbolic of this, or indicative of this movement now, that the damage he's doing to the country has become impossible to ignore. And that now the question is, what do we do about it, right? And are there constraints put on him? Will the Supreme Court rule against him on his tariffs to sort of take the pain of the tariffs away from the Republican Party? We don't know. But what we do know is that if we don't fight, if you can't shoot, unless you shoot, you can't score, right? Like, if we're not fighting with everything we have every day, then there is no possibility of this going in the right direction. And that all we can do is to continue to do what we all do, right? We do this professionally. Many people who are listening and watching are, volunteers and just big citizens doing the thing they need to do. We need to be all in every day as much as we possibly can. And again, being intolerant of behavior that is not bold and ambitious, because the bold and ambitious is not just a way of expressing your concern for the country. It's where the politics is now, right? The politics has shifted. Trump is stumbling. He can't run away from his failures. It would be insane politically for us not to be on offense and taking advantage of this opportunity and seizing this opportunity that we have. It would be ruinous for us. So I do think that in many ways, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries don't have, their choices of where they go have been limited to some degree based on these events over the last few weeks, and that the requirement for them to be bold and ambitious is now far more clear, right? That the sort of easy path is far harder to take, and that, we have a big job to do to continue to encourage them to be patriots and fight for their country the way that Americans have fought for freedom and democracy throughout all of our history.
Yeah, here. I hope they'll listen to you. It's time for an end to this democratic tradition of the bland leading the bland. And people need to listen, and hopefully they'll listen to this, and they'll listen to the Hopium Chronicles, and they'll listen to everything in all of Tara's media empire, which is doing such good work everywhere. And hopefully, because you guys are our friends, you'll keep coming back and we'll keep talking about it. Until then, join us at all the other stuff we've got going on and support it if you can. And we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody. Thanks, David.